Greetings. Welcome to the Stoic Poetry Podcast. My name is Kurt, and I'm glad you're here with me. This is very different doing this with a purpose. Well, I shouldn't say that. With a social purpose in mind, rather than the solitary purpose that this podcast has endeavored under the banner of which for several years. But before I get started, welcome and a toast to you. I'm kicking off this episode, this new strategy, with a bottle of local wine from one of the valley vintners here in the Chihuahua Valley. This is Hawkwatch, just down the valley from where I live. And I went there a couple of days ago and bought this bottle of wine from them. And there's a story in that too, but I need a little more wine in me before I can tell that story. Certainly the most expensive bottle of wine I've ever bought, $40. And frankly, I can't tell the difference, but it was well worth it for this aforementioned story that I'm not yet ready to tell. I'll need a little more of this in me to begin. Excuse me while I sip. And I do have a hose armed directly behind me, should any stray or errant embers land and cause a fire. Let me just take a peek real quick, make sure I'm not burning the valley down. Look like we're good. Okay. All right, I have a number of things to tend to tonight with this podcast. It's a Sunday evening on the cusp of another week, yet it is a different experience for me. More about that a little later, too. I need a little more of this wine in me. Hopefully I won't drink too much to regret it. First, let me explain a little bit about what this podcast has been about and how it's changing. So, if I haven't introduced myself, and if you've heard this before, forgive me if I repeat myself. My name is Kurt Bell. I'm a family man. I've been with my wife, Yumiko, for 37 years. We have a daughter, Emily. She's grown. She's 23, soon to be 24 in about 2 months. We have 2 little dogs, a little black dog called Ollie, a Schipperke, a little white dog called Rudy, a Chihuahua, long-haired Chihuahua, Pomeranian mix. This podcast is coming from you from the Anza Borrego Desert in the middle of California, Southern California. Way up in elevation. I'm at 4,600 feet. It's a very high desert. You can hear from the crickets. It's a very crickety desert. I like crickety places. Crickets sing a tune that is a good accompaniment to thought. And as you can hear from the growling, there are things out there in the night that are more formidable than the tone of crickets. My dogs keep a close watch. They're both on the patio right here in their little crates, safe from owls and coyotes. But they can nevertheless enjoy the night. In fact, little Rudy, the white dog, the little long-haired Chihuahua Pom mix, likes to spend on his own every night outdoors, facing down whatever beasts are out here. And there are formidable beasts. In addition to the aforementioned coyotes, there are bobcats. There was even a mountain lion seen in the vicinity last week. I have to keep a close eye out for my feet. If you see something hopping about on the ground, there are large desert toads, of all things, that come out in the night to feed on the creepy crawlies on the ground. And rattlesnakes are slithering around in search of those. Tarantulas are on the spot. Scorpions and a creature of nightmare called the salpugid. Look it up if you want to not sleep tonight. They're out and about tonight as well. That's why I'm wearing my hiking boots right now. The wine is good. The memory is better. More on that in a little bit. I need more of this in me. Why do you need wine in you, Kurt, to talk? Well, I've never needed wine or alcohol to facilitate the fluidity of my discourse, but it serves as a good excuse. I can, whatever I say, once I've had enough wine, I can blame it on the wine. So it's my cover, it's my alibi, so to speak. My cover, like I said. Oh, back to who I am, and never mind the time. I'll let this go as long as it needs. Until the battery runs out or the fire's gone altogether. I can throw another log on. Why don't I do that? Before I really get into it. Is that hot? Ooh, it is hot. Wow, I've got a little hook thing here. I can lift this up. Let me get the wood ready first. Don't want to lift it up and let any spare embers fly about. Okay, here we go. I've got a nice big log here. Open this. Ah, this is nice. How about one more? One more. Why not, right? This life is coming to an end soon. What, you're leaving the desert? No, I mean, this life is coming to an end soon. I meant it just like I said it. What are you talking about, Kurt? What's that talk? Don't you know? I talk about death all the time. The topic of death pervades my content. You don't want to sign up for any of my channels or follow any of my feeds if you don't want to hear about death. More about that later. So, anyway, back to this who I am and what this Stoic poetry is. Strange name for a podcast related to Japan, don't you think? Yeah, it is. Well, anyway, long story short, all these decades with my wife producing a daughter and living across the countries of Japan and the United States, we wound up here in Southern California in 2024, bringing the whole show of the production of family to a close. It doesn't mean that, we're not a family anymore. It just means that the hard work of the endeavor of familial obligation is largely finished. The daughter is grown. She's degree in hand, has her own job, and doesn't really need us anymore. We witnessed that by the fact that she called me this morning, Emily that is. If I hadn't told you her name yet, I think I did. And we talked for 2 hours straight on video. And she told me all about her life in Tokyo and her apartment and her job and her career aspirations and bills and money and all that stuff. But never once in that conversation did she desire anything more from me than my advice about the use of artificial intelligence to help her achieve some of her ends, namely her job as in public relations. We talked about how she might use artificial intelligence to further the ends there. What is out there? The dogs sense things in the night. I don't know what it is. Can you hear the growling? So that 2 hours together with Emily this morning was evidence far and away that our job is done. So we're bringing all of this to a close. Yumiko and Emily, wife and daughter, are gone back to Japan. Emily in Tokyo for her life. My wife, Yumiko, in Shizuoka to begin our new life there, securing us a place to live, furnishing a place to live, outfitting a place to live with both the routine and the implements of said living. The routines to begin, the bills to pay, the habits to form, the connections to build, the obligations in the community and the extended family to foster and maintain. She'll have all that in place by the time I get there in 2.5 months from now. A total of half a year separated. She's got a half-year head start. Oh, and we had a milestone today. She arrived in Japan on May 23rd. this year, and it is September 22nd. So we could round that off to May, June, July, August, September. What is that? 5 May, June, July, August, September. 4 months. 4 months, and today's the day she finally got a table in our new place and had her first meal off the table. Milestone of sorts. 4 months from departure to start. Granted, I got to tell you, she went with nothing but 2 suitcases full of photographs and memories. No furniture, no nonsense. We always start from scratch, the 2 of us. And our daughter has picked that up as well. Kurt, you're making a long way around to explain this Stoic poetry name. I know, I'll get there. Anyway, the precursor adventure to this current adventure of returning to Japan was the adventure of coming back to America, which really started in 2013, late 2012, when I resolved to return to America to try to climb back on my feet after falling flat on my face for the second time in Japan. I won't go into too much detail on that, but I've never been able to succeed in Japan. Japan has always been a place of failure for me in every way you can imagine, including business, language. I don't speak Japanese very well. I can get by, but not for all the years I've lived there. The bare responsibilities. I mean, I've always fulfilled my responsibilities. I've always been a dutiful man, but I just couldn't make it in Japan. So I came back twice to get back on my feet. The first time, and this is way ancient history, the first time was 1992. Came back with nothing. Came back to America after a couple of years in Japan. From like 89 to 91, late 91. I came back, and I didn't expect myself to succeed in Japan then. I was still single. I was dating my wife, the woman that would become my wife then. But I came back to America with nothing, $2,000, which was enough. I was literally homeless when I came back to America. I slept on the beach in 1992. And I got up in the morning and I would buy a paper and look at the job, help with the wanted. I remember back in the day when those things were in the newspaper. I would look through the job listings. In Santa Barbara, California, of all places, the Western Riviera of the United States. That was deliberate. Yumiko and I, after our 2-year sojourn in Japan, in the Osaka area, in Sakai City to be exact, when we decided to come back to America, we decided, as long as we're starting from scratch and it's going to be hard, why don't we pick the best place we can imagine? And that was Santa Barbara. And it was the best place ever. But we didn't have any money, couldn't live there, couldn't rent a place, didn't have a job, had $2,000. I spent like $1,500 of it to buy an old truck, had $500 left. Yumiko remained in Japan. She waited for me to get everything set up. And me, so young, how old was I? I don't know anymore. 92? I was born in 1964. 70, 80, 90, 25, 26, something like that. So naive. Sleeping on a sleeping bag on the beach. Getting up in the morning and cold calling jobs in the newspaper, and then going to apartments and looking for a place to live with no credit, no background, nothing but a degree in my hand. Well, would you believe we pulled it off? And that was 92. We in Santa Barbara, the hardest place ever. And by 2000, I was a millionaire, living on a 1-acre estate in Ojai, California, with a swimming pool and an orchard and a sprawling ranch house with a beautiful patio and $1 million in the bank. 2 brand new cars in the driveway. A newborn daughter in her little room with everything she could ever hope for. wardrobe full of nice clothes, garden full of all the best gardening stuff, all the beautiful plants and flowers. So yeah, we pulled it off. I came back to America and climbed back on my feet and then some. But I was then 2000, 64, 70, 80, 90, 34 years old. The early decades of my adulthood, the mid decades of my adulthood were never easy. They were not good for me. I was a lost and confused man all that time. Fortunately, my wife suffered as a result. I wasn't a bad man, but I was lost and confused, trying to find my peace, which, despite all that we had in our success in California, starting from nothing, I wasn't happy. And Emiko wasn't happy either. Emily was just one, not even one. Joe, she was like your little one at that time, like little Yuki. So guess what we did? We sold the place for a song, sold all the brand new vehicles we had bought for a song, gave away or sold at pennies on the dollar at a garage sale, everything that we had, all the $4,000 sofa I remember buying, the bed, all the beautiful furniture, all gone. And we packed everything into 2 suitcases each, and we went to Japan with lots and lots of money. Now, we established ourselves in Japan in 2003, and by 2008, it was all gone. The money was all gone, and then some. It wasn't. I like to tell people that it was the financial collapse of 2007, the global economic crisis, that was our downfall, but that's not really true. It was my folly and stupidity. You're like, how does one go through $1 million in, what was it, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 5 years? Well, take me out, buy me a drink one day, and I'll tell you how to lose $1 million in 5 years. And then some. Wound up about $10,000 in debt by the time it was all done. We were living in a little apartment in Shizuoka then. Emily was in kindergarten. The money was all gone. I had no job. Yumiko was a stay-at-home mom. We were $10,000 in debt. Bad, hard time. The low point had been reached. Buy me a drink, I'll tell you what it was like sometime. Well, anyway, I did what needed to be done. Literally borrowed my mother-in-law's Mama Chatty bicycle and made up a bunch of flyers, pedaled my butt all around Shizuoka to every Eikaiwa language school in town, opened the door, went inside, and said, I'm looking for a job. Well, I said it nicer than that. Gave him a flyer and went. And I was picked up by a school in Shimizu that rescued us. And then one thing led to another, and I wound up in a very cushy job in Shizuoka, making a great salary, set for life, full-time teacher at a private kindergarten through high school with connections to college. I was really lucky I got back in shape. We were back on our feet. We were okay. We were going to be okay. But remember I told you, troubled individual that I am. Well, I would say was. I think I've gotten better. That wasn't going to work. Something was missing. I would tell, let me tap another sip. It helps. At least it helps me to blame myself. Long story short, I drugged my family back to America. Ostensibly, at the time, I would have told you to come back to help my mom, or I would have come back to help to give America to my daughter. But as long as it's just me and you talking, the truth was I came back to pursue that elusive success that I had lost. Came back. I wasn't, I don't know if I want to go down that road. I wasn't proud of myself in Japan. I will go down that road. I didn't feel, so there were a couple of reasons. I need a little more wine. More excuse tonic. That's what I bought this bottle for. It's hard to talk about this stuff. Well, let me just say what I already said, which is that I've always been a failure in Japan in every way. I've failed at the language. All my fault. I'm not blaming anybody. I failed at my career. I was never able to support my family on the meet to the degree that I wanted to. I failed as, okay, I know it's not politically correct, but I'm a boomer. 1964, last year of the boomers. That's the year I was born. So grant me that. I failed as what I thought was my role as, I know it's not politically correct to say, but the head of the household, right? You know, the man of the house. Because I couldn't do things like in Japan. I couldn't be responsible. I couldn't make informed decisions. I was acquiescing to decisions made by my wife after the fact without my assistance, really. And I didn't feel like my daughter, I wasn't proud of myself in my daughter's eyes as she was growing up. I thought she would see me as a mediocre provider, peripheral to the experience of the family. What I mean by that is when our family gets together, as we do, the extended family, I would sit there in the sidelines of the hachijo, the 8-mat room where the family would gather, nodding and smiling, not comprehending what was going on around me. Sure, I could pay the bills and I could make sure that the food was on the table, but hardly anything more. So, and this is really the first time I've ever told anybody this, I conspired to get my butt back to America and have another shot at success. Yeah, and I drugged my whole family with me. Now, it didn't take a lot of dragging to convince my wife. She and I are very alike. We get bored easily, and we like the other place. And her English is fluent. I mean, fluent in the most serious regard. So, and her understanding of American culture is rock on, spot on. So life here for her is not an issue at all. She enjoys it. She lived it before. She was eager to come back as well. It was our daughter that we drug along. Really, she didn't have a choice. And I still feel bad about that. Even though everything turned out okay, I still feel bad about that. Anyway, so I conspired to come back. And I succeeded in getting our butts back, me first. And 14 months later, my family followed. We threw our daughter into the deep end of America. Oh, okay, well, we chose Irvine to settle, so Irvine's like not a big deal. Irvine because of its Asian community in the English language program there. Anyway, we came back, and long story short, 10 years later, we climbed back up to the top again. Not a millionaire, but this is where I have to sit up and not slouch, because I don't want to be. But we reached the point, we succeeded enough in this last 10 years that Yumiko and I don't have to work anymore. And that our daughter's college is done. We can move on and we can go back now to Japan as a retired couple with our daughter's education completed on her own. So I would constitute that, starting from zero, less than zero, as a second time that America proved to be the land of opportunity. I came to America with nothing twice and climbed back up and got my family on our feet. And redeemed myself, I believe, in the eyes of my daughter and in the eyes of myself and my sense of my responsibility, my perceived self-imposed responsibility as a family man, as the man of the house, as the head of the family. Now, what that means is that with the daughter grown, the finances secure for life, I can go back to Japan and I don't have to worry about failing again. I've accepted my limits of my language. I feel like I've done my duty to my family and my daughter in particular. Now I can go back and just enjoy the years that remain. All this by way of trying to explain what the heck Stoic poetry is. I think I got a lot out in the process. I'm glad I did. That's the story. That's where we are. Well, remember I told you there was 14 months that between when I came to America and when my family joined me? Well, I wasn't idle during that 14 months. I worked like a son of a gun. Within about 2 weeks of arrival back in America and starting my new job as an IT business systems analyst, I realized I wasn't qualified for that job and that I was in danger of getting fired. And I worked my butt off to make sure that didn't happen, because that would have been a disaster of all disasters, to have lost my job in America, my position in America, in debt, have to come back to America again, back to Japan again, to face my family with nothing. So I made sure that didn't happen by working my butt off. And within a year and then 2 years, I had figured out how to do my job. And now by the time it's 10 years done, I think I've got it pretty well mastered, just in time to quit it. But that 14 months, when I wasn't working super hard during the week, I had my weekends free. There's the International Space Station. Hurtling overhead, I can see it right now. Wow, look at that. It's headed right for the Big Dipper. Watch out. Anyway, I can see the stars here and the satellites so clearly here at night. Anyway, 14 months alone. What I did with those weekends was that I went alone, literally. I went deep into the desert. Not this desert. This desert isn't nearly empty enough. You can hear the dogs barking. There's things to growl at. There's crickets. I went to a much deeper desert than this, where the nights are utterly silent, devoid of life, practically. Moonscape, landscape. And I did something that I've been doing since I was a boy, which is stepping off the beaten path, leaving the prescribed trail, and going off into the wilderness alone. The result of that time was a book called Going Alone, which is my personal life's work. My familial life's work is the raising of my daughter. My personal life work is that book. That book is, as the man says, my barbaric yelp, my spoken message written down for the benefit of anyone who gives a damn to look. One of the chapters in that book is called Stoic Poetry. Very deliberate name, as it is a collection of writing that I did during that 14 months, where I knew I was under the influence of my Stoic reading, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius. So what happened was, after I was done in the desert, after my family came back, and we had settled into our beautiful apartment in Irvine, I would leave the apartment after dinner, after my wife had settled down to her shows and my daughter had retired to her room, and I would step out to the garden area of the apartment, sit on a bench, and I would speak into the microphone the echoes of those 14 months alone, the reverberating thoughts that came through my mind after all those months of aloneness and all that effort to write the book. And I wrote over 200 episodes of Stoic poetry, knowing that they were reflections of the book and the influence of Stoicism. That's why it's called Stoic poetry then. Now you know. So I've been talking for a long time, and I think I've brought that part to a close. Now I've explained the title of this podcast. I've decided to keep it up, although I'll start a new season. This is season 3, episode 2 of the Stoic Poetry Podcast, as I endeavor to transition this podcast away from the last 2 seasons, which were the recording of the afterglow of my time alone in the desert. And now I'm going to move this podcast to a new setting in Japan, a new home, so to speak. So here I am, half a bottle of wine in. I've explained my podcast. Now, let me make the necessary transition. Let's see if I can erase this moody isolation sense that has pervaded both my writing and my videos and my podcasts up until now. I'm 2.5 months away from leaving this. I'm 2.5 months away from going home to Japan, home to my wife, home to her extended family and my dog, or the place where my daughter lives. The dogs are going too, the little black dog and the white dog too. And it's time for me to give up this desert life. And more importantly, to relinquish this desert thought, this desert way of thinking, of this emptiness of mind that was so useful in distilling out the values that I will now use to live a good life in the remaining years, but are no longer needed if I'm going home to Japan. The paradigm is so much different. So with that sip, let's transition. Deep breath. I'm going to leave it behind. But it's more than the desert that I'm leaving behind. It's the weight and the responsibility of adulthood that I've carried for 40 years on my shoulders, since age 20 to now age 60, that is now nearly complete. It's a Sunday night, like I said. Monday is tomorrow, and it has no power over me. I do apologize to those to whom Monday still has that influence. I know that it's hard, it's insensitive of me to speak such a way to those that are suffering from Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays, etc. But your time will come. I'm probably older than you. I'm 60. My time in the queue in the roller coaster is done. It's time for me to ride the coaster. But bear in mind, by the time you reach my age, I'll probably be debilitated or dead. It's a short window of time from roughly age 60 to 70, 75 when irrelevance kind of steps in. It's my turn at the roller coaster now. I hope that you're preparing for your chance. Forgive me then if it takes me some time to give this up. It's been a long time carrying this weight, this responsibility. I don't know if I can do it. The wine isn't helping with this. I would need to be without the wine to push past. Sobriety is what's needed. So let me just jump forward, shall we? Let's take a quick walk around the fire to symbolize the completion of the major phase of life, the adult responsibility phase of life. Okay, let's now get into something new. I'm going to begin by answering a question from Paprika Girl, who asked on the Gaijin Twitter podcast collective an interesting question. Why we remain in Japan? No, granted I'm not in Japan, but I can play act like I am. And I will be soon. So, Ricky, your question was a hard one for me. For half a day after you asked that question, I thought about the answer, struggled with the answer, and I couldn't come up with anything, until I realized the problem wasn't the answer. The issue was with the question. Because the way you had phrased the question was, why do you stay in Japan? And you had put a caveat in here, and it was the caveat that was very important. You said, excluding familial connection and relations. Why do you stay in Japan? And that was the part that turned out to be the hard part. And what I realized was that I needed a different question. Instead of, why do you stay in Japan? Sans family and connection. The question should be, would you stay in Japan? Sans family and connection. And as soon as I changed the question, came up with my answer. And the answer is, I would not. Now, let me explain that. This doesn't mean that I don't like or love Japan. It simply means, and I'm going to quote Henry David Thoreau now in a way that I want to do in many of my videos. Henry David Thoreau, the author of Walden, was asked after he left Walden Pond, the little cabin that he stayed at the shore of Walden Pond, after 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days, he was asked, why did he leave the woods? And his response was, I'm paraphrasing, I left the woods for as good a reason as I went there. Perhaps I had new lives to live and new experiences to have, and could afford no more time for this one, and did not, when I come to the end of my life, want to find that I had not lived at all. So that's why I would answer that Japan, without the family and the connections of community, etc., would I stay in Japan? No. I've had plenty of time in that country, and there's a wide world out there to experience that I would embrace instead, considering myself well sated with the Japan experience. So that revealed to me, and thank you, Ricky, for helping me to see this, that the reason for Japan is family. Now, that's not a hard thing because Japan's a great place to live. So I'm there for the family, and I'm really lucky that it happens to be one of the most marvelous places I could ever know. So thank you for asking that question, Ricky, Paprika Girl. It helped me to see something that I had missed before. Never would have seen it had you not asked. Okay. I feel like this podcast episode is coming to an end. Remember, it's extemporaneous. I don't have a plan when I start this. But I think I'll finish with something equally extemporaneous. Joe, I was so moved by your latest podcast. If you make it this far, I just want to let you know you are the GOAT in terms of your ability to communicate. There is a quality to your communication which is so genuine as to just, it seeps through the microphone. And this is true of most, well, how do I say it? I could say everybody in the Gaijin Twitter podcast collective, though not everybody embraces that. Like Kevin, I'm going to single you out, Kevin, if you get this far. You've totally got that ability, but it seems like you believe that you need to wrap it in production. you don't need to. It's good when you do. Some of your podcasts require that production. But when it's genuine Kevin, that's the Kevin I like. Now, I'm not going to start listing off other people because I'll forget people. And my intention is to cover everybody, but you all know who you are. You do this because you have an original voice. And I would like to ask everybody in the Gaijing Twitter podcast collective to, and anybody that is an aspiring podcaster in whatever venue, in whatever capacity, to just look for a moment to Joe as an example. That's Ishikawa Summit to see if you don't know. Look at his latest episode. Today is September 22nd, 2022, 24 that is. Look at his latest episode. Look at that opening. Look at that transition, all the while monitoring the baby monitor for his little one, yet nevertheless pulling off that podcast. Joe, you are the GOAT. And I'm going to finish with my own effort as a homage to Joe. Take one last sip of my wine. One last swig. There we go. Joe, this is for you. He's a giant of a man, shambling from the front of his apartment each morning, Monday through Friday, with his bairn under his arm, getting the tram ready to issue forth across the landscape, headed to the baby Hoikuen. Along the way, admiring the landscape, seeing it for what it is, wondering at the events that have unfurled here over time, all the while barely aware that his little one may be dangling a treasured treasure over the side to let loose at one point, to leave that treasure at the side of the rice field, to later to cause Joe to come back, dismayed and countenance crumbled as he wonders after the location of said treasure. Possibly across his mind comes thoughts of a home, an ambition of his family's to have a place of their own, a place where a man can bend over in peace, cross under the threshold of each and every door without worry or without complaint. A place to have his own, 1, 2, 3 floors high, whatever it takes. Sure, it might be a hazard and a quake, but not if you use the remaining resources that you have at your disposal to make that place safe. Then your little one can play at leisure. You can sleep in peace, Joe, you and your wife, your Gorgonella, together side by side, your hairy self under the night, the roof secure. Good carpentry doth provide the sanctuary. Certainly the cost will be high, but the worthwhile shall be gained in the immediate moments of security and the deep slumber that will come from the nights of not worrying about the roof falling on your head. That said, Joe, maybe the 3rd floor it should go. As for Casey, We know your ribbing is in jest on Ishikawa summit to see the pain you feel in losing your partner is acute. We know. Never you mind. Yet go on with your ribbing. Go on, it is your way. We know that it is said with love and caring and compassion. And Casey, know that Joe misses you, as you certainly miss him. But we know the separate ways will forge a path which you need to go, Casey. You and Pino, your new co-host. No Joe, that's for sure. No Schmo either. The words, they come now. Yes, Ishikawa Summit to Sea will never be the same without Casey. But, Joe, it is yours now to endeavor to persevere. And Casey, keep up with the bean pod, you and Pino. It is your mission. Hardly though your mission, really, which is your family. I know. Joe, too. You each are striving in your own way towards that same mission, which I know so well, being, these 10, 15 years ahead. I know. Success is yours, both of you. Even though your podcast is through, maybe someday you two will be together again. But until then, we'll see you on the Gaijin Twitter podcast collective. Don't be strangers. Joe, that's my extemporaneous effort to homage to your abilities. So, I think I've had enough. The fire's died down. I've told my story as hard as it was in some ways. The dogs barking incessantly. Believe it or not, they're not like this. I don't know what's going on tonight, but usually the neighbors' dogs are not so noisy. My own dogs are at peace. I can see them slumbering now. The fire is dim. The wine is, my $40 bottle of wine is spent. How much remains in the bottle? Half a bottle still. What a lightweight. Thank you for sharing this evening with me. I'll douse the fire now. Douse the light. Cork the bottle. Bring in the black dog. The white dog will sleep outside. I'll shower myself, eat some grapes, and go to bed. Tomorrow, to hell with it. Who cares? I've got 50 days of my career left. Bless you, anyone, if you make it to this point. I don't know why retiring people don't talk about it. It's an amazing experience and a cautionary tale to anybody in their younger years. We should all be preparing for this time. It's a time of freedom, a time of respite, a time of sober examination of what life has meant till now as we prepare to enter the final years, final decades, hopefully, of a life well lived. So, I'll say goodnight now. You know my Stoic poetry story, why I do this, what this is, what this was, and what I intend this to be. I intend it. It is my own intention to make this into something else. I will return to Japan, liberated of the need to succeed, done with those shackles, at peace, and with a creed. And I will continue with my Stoic poetry, even though it has nothing to do with Japan. It is my podcast after all, and I am its man. Good night. I wish you rest West best. And I say to you, be safe, but never ever too safe. Good night.